interesting grants over the next 2 years. Consequently, the Czech Republic has only managed to draft 10% of the 34.8 billion crowns that the EU placed at its disposal between 2014 and 2020. And finally, a quick look at the weather forecast. Tuesday should be mostly overcast with scattered showers and day temperatures between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius. I'm Daniela Lazarova, and that's the end of the news.
Hello and welcome to Radio Prague, the international service of Czech radio. Coming up in today's program, the Social Democrats added some fresh faces to the leadership lineup, but will it be enough to revive the party's popularity? Czech exports are expected to dip in the second quarter, suggests a study by the Export Association and Raiffeisen Bank. We have the summary of the latest Czech sports news, and later, on the occasion of Eva Jiřičná's 80th birthday, which is celebrated on Sunday, we bring you an interview she gave to Radio Prague a couple of years ago. All that coming up, so please stay with us. At their party congress this weekend, the Social Democrats re-elected Minister of Interior Jan Hamáček chairman and elevated rising political star Minister of Foreign Affairs Tomáš Petříček to deputy chairman. Delegates also endorsed a revised party platform representing a shift some observers view as more radically left, other towards a mainstream European centre. Regardless, will it be enough to revive the party's popularity? Brian Kennedy has more.
The center-left Social Democrats have suffered devastating back-to-back losses in recent elections. In 2017, only 15 of their candidates were elected to the lower house of parliament, the worst result in party history. Last year, the party failed to win a single seat in the Prague Assembly in municipal elections for the first time since the fall of communism, and the only senator to successfully defend his seat was none other than Jan Hamáček.
I think the
worst is behind us. The atmosphere in the Congress Hall was completely different from what it was a year ago. Today, I could sense a self-confident party that knows what it wants and in what direction to head. We have work to do in the government, and our participation in this government has purpose.
As the junior partner in the current coalition government, led by Prime Minister Andrej Babiš's technocratic populist ANO party, it's fair to say that the Social Democrats have been punching above their weight, occupying positions of influence not reflected in their current support at the ballot box. A February poll by the Center for Public Opinion Research shows the Social Democrats polling at 11%, while the survey by the Median Agency puts it at just 8%. Both have the party in fourth place, barely ahead of the Communists and the far-right SPD party. In a document approved on Saturday, the Social Democrats define themselves as vanguards against a slide towards liberalism. Their newly outlined top priorities include boosting citizens' participation in political decisions and cutting working hours without lowering salaries. But mainly the Social Democrats appear to be hoping prominent fresh faces in the leadership, chiefly those of Minister of Foreign Affairs Tomáš Petříček and Labour and Social Affairs Minister Jana Malačová, both under 40, will attract new voters. Deputy Party Chairman Roman Onderka, the only other member of the leadership aside from Hamáček to be re-elected to his post, said the party recognized the need to continue in the 21st century with new blood.
These are people who are clearly steering the Social Democrats towards the EU, and I hope for the sake of the party that today truly breathes a new beginning.
In a roundtable discussion with Czech radio, political commentator Patrik Eichler of the online forum Deník Referendum downplayed talk of a fundamental shift in the outlook of the Social Democrats, whose party color is orange, for example, towards communist red or some such hybrid.
As for whether one is a pinker, more orange or redder Social Democrat, I think we can say the new leadership are absolutely normal Social Democrats. All stand for protecting the rights of employees and the working poor and those in need of help. Political commentator Patrik Eichler, ending that report by Brian Kennedy.
Now, foreign and internal economic factors will cause the Czech export sector to lose its breath in the second quarter of 2019, at least according to an export prediction method produced by the Export Association and Raiffeisen Bank. Authors of the study say that the undersaturated labour market in the Czech Republic has forced many companies to delay their deliveries and thus hindered potential orders from abroad. Tom McEncrow has more.
The Czech economy has been one of the best performing EU economies in recent years and maintained relatively solid year-on-year domestic growth in the final quarter of 2018, despite a downturn in the Eurozone. This hopeful finish included exports, which reached year-on-year growth of 2% in December and 3.4% for 2014 in total. But challenges still lie ahead, economists are saying. Data from the Export Index, a prediction method co-authored by the Exporters Association in Czech Asociace Exportérů and Raiffeisen Bank, which uses a series of statistical data and selected leading indicators to predict Czech export performance in the immediate future months, shows that the country's export volume is likely to slow down in the second quarter of this year. Helena Horská, chief economist of the Czech branch of Raiffeisen Bank, explains this skeptical forecast.
The main reason for that is the negative outlook for foreign demand, especially from Eurozone and also from UK, that it planning to go out of the EU, so-called Brexit.
The low foreign demand is not just caused through uncertainty in foreign economies, but also due to domestic factors as well. Ms. Horská says many companies have to delay their exports because there is not enough workers to saturate production needs.
Czech companies already last year faced the problem of a lack of employees on Czech labor market, and the companies had to postpone some production. So some companies had a problem to fulfill their orders, and they have to postpone the finalizing of production. This also was the reason why Czech export and also Czech industry production had slowed down last year.
The brunt of the negative impact will hit the car industry, which is heavily dependent on German economic performance, currently affected by Eurozone regulations. Meanwhile, electronics exports, a sector that makes up around 14% of the economy, according to Czech trade data, grew in the last quarter of 2018 and helped keep the overall exports and industrial production in the black. Ms. Horská says she expects Czech-made electronics to continue to do well on the export market.
Especially exactly with the electrical and electric sector will grow, because we should see some higher impact of higher demand, especially in electrical and electrical machineries.
Asked about the long term, the Raiffeisen Bank economist is optimistic, however. She says that while a slowdown in the first half of 2019 is expected, the second half of the year should see a slow acceleration in the Eurozone. However, the peak of the economic cycle has passed, Ms. Horská says.
Tom McEncrow with that report, and Tom stays in the studio with a summary of the latest sports news.
It was a big weekend for Czech ice skater Martina Sáblíková, who won her 20th World Championship title at the World All-Round Speed Skating event in Calgary on Sunday. The 31-year-old, who had to practice skating moves in her parents' flat as a child, also set new world record times on the 3,000 and 5,000 meter distances. Sáblíková can now add this title in the all-round speed skating category to the 4 she already has. And in football, in the Premier Tier of the Football League, Slavia maintained their lead after a 3-0 win away at Bohemians 1905. However, the clash has become the most discussed game in Czech football this week. Slavia's first goal came after the Bohemians players started celebrating their own goal, which would have taken them into a 1-0 lead. But after consulting with a video record, the referee called a foul that the home team had committed in Slavia's penalty area seconds before Bohemians scored, and the league leaders then scored from the resulting penalty, shocking the still celebrating home fans. While the referee's call has been judged as being correct, Bohemians coach Martin Hašek told O2 TV he had a different opinion.
Pak přišla ta situace, která podle mě ovlivnila celý zápas, a to je...
That moment affected the whole game. I think this was wrongly handled by the referee and his colleague reviewing the video.
Chybně posouzená situace, chybná součinnost videorozhodčího a hlavního rozhodčího.
Second-placed Plzeň also won their game against FK Jablonec, but still trail Slavia by 3 points. In ice hockey, Extraliga leaders Bílí Tygři Liberec continued their string of bad results on Sunday, losing 2-3 in overtime to title defenders Kometa Brno. Second-placed HC Oceláři Třinec thus managed to narrow down Liberec's lead to just 2 points after they beat Plzeň away 2-1. This past weekend in Glasgow, Czech athletes had to endure their worst European Indoor Championships results since 1994, whereas 2 years ago strong track racing results helped the Czech Republic place 5th overall in the country's medal list. This year they had to settle for the bottom spot together with Hungary and Lithuania. The winner of the Czech Republic's only medal, Tomáš Staněk, who won bronze in shot put, told Czech television he was happy to get on the podium after being plagued with muscle problems.
After a season of injuries, I can just say thank God that I got some medal out of it.
And when it comes to skiing, 20-year-old Tomáš Klinský, a student at the Czech Technical University in Prague, managed to win a silver medal in the Super G at the Winter Universidad in Krasnoyarsk. Klinský missed out on the top spot by 0.2 of a second, allowing Lukas Zippert from Switzerland to take gold. The Czechs were less lucky in the women's Super G, however, where Veronika Čamková and Tereza Nová both took 4th spot after having exactly the same time. And that is all the sport for now.
Just a reminder that you are listening to Radio Prague, the international service of Czech radio. The Czech architect Eva Jiřičná is famous internationally for her sleek interiors and signature glass and steel staircases. In this interview from a couple of years back, she discusses her wartime childhood in Zlín and her life-changing decision to remain in the United Kingdom after 1968.
Eva Jiřičná is perhaps the best-known living Czech architect. Her London-based firm, Eva Jiřičná Architects, is famous for its sleek boutiques and dramatic staircases, while in recent decades she's designed a number of acclaimed buildings in her native country. Based in the UK since the 1960s, Jiřičná was born in the Moravian town of Zlín, where her father was an architect with the Batia Shoe Company. In the first half of a two-part interview, Eva Jiřičná recalls her early childhood in the Nazi protectorate.
It was during the Second World War, so the situation was really not terribly pleasant. So my parents tried to protect not only me, but also the other children from what was happening. We had an SS officer who was living across the road, and his daughter was my age, and so several times I hid her when she behaved badly. So then my parents had sleepless nights trying to see what the father's reaction was going to be, but we somehow survived. And in 1944, Zlín was bombed. So my father and the other architects were moved from Zlín to a little village outside Prague to somebody's, one of Bata's directors' hunting lodge, when they were supposed to work on reconstruction of Zlín. Of course, the war finished, and then Bata finished as well, because the nationalization came very shortly after. So I
never went back to Zlín, and I grew up in Prague.
I wanted to ask you, what do you recall of the latter days of the war? You were born in 1939, so at the end of the war you were 5 or 6. Do you remember, for example, the Prague uprising?
I do remember it very well, because my father and those 2 other architects who we were sharing the house with went to help to fight on the barricades and build the barricades in Prague. So they walked, because there was no means of transport. So my mom and the other lady, another wife of another architect with her little daughter, who was only 2 years old, I was 5.5. So we were waiting, and I do remember, I just have heard on the radio that the war was over, and even as a child I had this tremendous pleasure. I was running around the house and playing with my little toy and saying the war is over, because we did have to go down to the cell every time, so the plane flew over. And so somehow I had this kind of minimal understanding of what the war meant. So, and then, of course, Prague started fighting. And then, again, a few days later, the Russian army came, because the Americans were held in prison, and so the Russians liberated Prague, and they also went through this little village. And my mom just took me, because everybody was so excited, so she took me to the road, and we were waving at the Russian tanks, and one thing which I do remember vividly, there was a Russian soldier, and he was wounded, and they threw him off the tank, and he was lying in a trench next to the road, and my mom and 2 other women rushed towards him and started looking for water. And of course, I had never seen a wounded person, and so I saw blood and so on. And so my mom just said to me, don't look, and then somehow, I don't really remember how it was eventually sorted, but I think they stopped one of the tanks, and according to my mom, so the Russian officer said, there are too many of us, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so we came back, and the little house, it was a hunting lodge, so it wasn't very small. So it was occupied by the Russian army, and they turned it into a hospital, and the bedroom where my parents used to sleep, so it was used for the Russian officers and their new girlfriends. And so we spent the night, I do remember it very vividly, I was actually put on the top of a cupboard in the kitchen, so where my mom put me to be away from the Russian soldiers, and she and the other lady locked herself up in the kitchen with us and the children. And my mom gave her watch to Sasha, one of the Russian soldiers, who had about 50 watches on his arm, and so he guarded the door until the morning, and then we walked to Prague. We went to my grandfather in Prague, and that was the end of the war.
Your dad was an architect, you became an architect. It may then look like it was the family business, but wasn't it unusual for a woman to become an architect in those days?
Well, everybody was trying to prevent me from doing so. Survive, don't do it. And because everybody was telling me not to do it, so I did it. So of course I was totally unprepared, so to pass the entry exam was a miracle, because I was totally unprepared. My portfolio was in bits, didn't have any, I had to do one very quickly. It was probably completely stupid and bad, but I passed all the other exams, physics and math, and so on, so I managed to get in, and there were 5 girls and 60 boys. And it took me 3 months, and after 3 months I knew I was at the right place. I absolutely fell in love with architecture, and I loved it ever since.
You went to London in 1968, prior to the Soviet invasion. You were planning to stay for only a year or so, I believe. When did it start sinking in that you wouldn't be going home, that your country had been occupied?
The fact that the country was occupied did not stop me from thinking that I was going back. I just thought, because I was so naive, I just thought it would get sorted in a couple of months, and because I came on the 1st of August, and it happened on the 21st of August, so I thought, by next August August it will be sorted and I'll be returning back to my country because everything would be okay. And it became not okay when I got a letter from Czech embassy saying that my passport was abolished, my visa was no longer valid, and the return to my country was no longer required. That is how they formulated it. What I didn't know then, that it was because I joined the Society for Human Rights, which I had absolutely no idea what it was, to be honest. I just signed it.
Ties across the Iron Curtain. Your family were still here, you were there in the UK.
Well, it was very difficult. My brother, who was only 17, by pure coincidence, he was working on one of the farms in England, picking strawberries or raspberries in order to get some money because he wanted to pay for an English course before he went to the university. And when he realized that I was not going to go back, so he said, well, I'm going to stay. And my father, who was in Japan, because there was a Czech pavilion to be constructed in Osaka to prepare for the exhibition, Osaka 1970, that exhibition. So he said, oh, children, don't worry, I'll pick you up on the way back. Well, my poor dad just had to fly via Moscow back to Prague, and then almost immediately after, he had a gallbladder stone, and he had an operation which went badly, so he got an infection after the operation, and he died in 1972, so he never picked us up. And we both remained in England, so I was helping my little brother, and now runs the Institute of Cancer Research in Zurich, so he studied, he did PhD, and eventually he had a very good career, so as a professional. So, but, I really, for 20 years, I thought it was not going to last forever. And when I just started thinking, yes, it is going to last forever, so suddenly it changed again. And Havel came with 1989, Velvet Revolution, and it was the end of it.
Going back a little bit to when you first moved to the UK, that was the late 1960s, the so-called swinging 60s. Did you experience all that stuff, or were you too busy building a new life, building a career?
I'm so lucky, I can't tell you. I did experience swinging 60s. I did enjoy, on the design side, Barry Quant and Flower Power, Woodstock, Beatles, you name it. I was the right age, and I just met the right people. And I think that this story is never going to be repeated, and I'm really, really grateful for it.
Architect Eva Jirichna was Ian Willoughby's guest in that edition of One on One, which was first broadcast in October 2016. And that brings us to the end of our program here on Radio Prague. If you have any comments, then please send them to us. You can contact us by email at english@radio.cz or on Facebook and Twitter. From me, Ruth Frankova, and all of us here at Radio Prague, thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.
Radio Prague, coming to you on the World Radio Network. On the web,